All right, welcome everybody to another DoneJS contributors meeting. I will go first with status. I've started putting in, I'm going to keep doing it, these high-level status of where we are in epics and what are our active epics, what we're working on. So right now there's kind of an epic to make a Bitcentive example application. We need to get Feathers and CanJS epic done for that to make integration work well for that. And Event Stream was also part of making Feathers and CanJS work, even though now it's kind of, the remaining tasks are more related actually to bitballs, but it's still part of that. So this just shows story points, where we are, and I hope to put this up every week. CanJS, since last time I did this, like 2 weeks ago, got 100 story points done, but we added like 80. But a lot of these are just the remaining website things to really be able to push 3.0 out, which we did yesterday. If you haven't seen it, there's a little video of us doing it and talking about CanJS 3.0. For my personal status, I've been starting to work on the website content. And I hope to finish all of that and write up a release article next week and start actually do kind of an official launch next week. That's my status topics. I want to talk about CanSet. There was a forum post about someone asking how to configure CanSet. It's rather difficult. I want to talk about where we could maybe prioritize that alongside our other tasks. So that is it for me. Who wants to go next? Or I'll choose. Matthew, you want to go next?
Yeah. So I'm working on the Still CSS. Still CSS and Still Less are not going to be part of like core Still in 1.0. So I'm moving those out. I'm refactoring Still CSS currently because there's a lot of overlap between what Still CSS and Done CSS do. I was thinking about combining them. Like we could do. The only reason why not is there are some DoneJS specific stuff that's in Done CSS. But anyway, so my refactor is more about like exporting stuff that Done CSS can use, so that it's not, that the code is more neatly organized.
You don't even want to include
working on that.
CSS in Steel? Like, you don't think that should come out of the box?
No, not really.
All right. I feel like it'll make the guides just slightly worse. But I guess some of the guides use CSS anyways.
Maybe CSS could. I don't know. I feel like if it's part of Steel, it should be part of Steel. Like we should not have a separate project if it's bundled with it. I'm not like super.
We can save it for a topic.
I have a super strong opinion on it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cool. Was that for next week too? I didn't know if you said this in next week.
Oh, for next week. For next week, I'm working on the migration guide, and that's it. That's all that's left. Hopefully, I'll get it done next week. Hopefully, it'll be released next week.
Sweet. David?
I started on the Climb project this week. We're gonna do an upgrade to 3.0. Probably start doing that next week, hopefully. And besides that, I just watched the release yesterday, so not too much new here.
That was fun. All right, Adam?
So I have started on the Bitcentive MVP. I've basically been spending some time getting sort of grokking the project and its current status and how much needs to be done just to get an MVP up. And I'm going to sort of continue doing that. I have more questions to ask more people and then start plugging away at the issues one at a time till we get them all done.
So the goal of Bitcentive, there's kind of two goals, right? There's kind of what it is for Bitovi, for people watching this outside Bitovi, is it's a way that we can reward open source contributions within Bitovi. But for an example app, its purpose is to show how to work with DoneJS and Feathers, and also a NoSQL. There's a few things. It's like how to work with Feathers and its sessions, and how to do NoSQL the right way. So it'll highlight kind of can connect Feathers. It'll highlight how it's doing sessions to do, like it's doing authentication with GitHub and things like that. And then what I think is also very interesting about it is just the NoSQL part. It's using CanMapRef, things like that. So hopefully we should have good patterns and a good guide at the end of this for other people building similar apps. Cool. Thanks, Adam. Ilya.
Hi, everybody. So I was working on Bitcentive demo and tests, and within this did two changes. One was about SteelSocket.io package. There was a need to postpone Socket.io connection till the socket fixtures are ready, and that package solves this problem. And another was about demo pages that so this SteelSocket.io relies on still done promise to see when it has to resume the connection.
Can anybody hear me? Sorry, I feel like my microphone just.
Yes.
Anyways, sorry, Ilya, to interrupt.
Yeah, and so for demo pages, we have to change a little bit for the still to wait till the main source. So when in demo page we specify the main application file for the still, but there is also there is also a part that can go inside the script tag where we load the still, and now it waits till this is loaded and evaluated, and this makes demo working with the socket fixtures. So yeah, I hope that made sense. And the next week, I guess I will be working with Adam on Bitcentive app, like incorporating all these things together and making the MVP working.
Awesome. Thanks, Ilya. Manuel?
Hey, so earlier this week, I continued working on some issues of the Steel.js BitDocs theme, and then I moved on to work on the table of content plugins. After that, just today, I started working on the Steel conditional build, but I just switched to CanJS. There is an issue with the docs where the demos are not working, and hopefully that gets resolved today. And then next week, I can continue working on the Steel conditional build. That's it.
Awesome. Mick?
Let's see. So I was able to finish up Func Unit stuff. So there's a new release with that, which has the guides, which has a contributor guide in it, which is nice and pretty. And then refactored the way that the GH pages works, as well as the release. The release stuff works, so that in package.json now we have all of this pretty stuff with the pre-version, post-version, all the release stuff in there. And the way that the GH pages are built is now via makefile, and it all lives inside of this instead of having some separate GH pages repository or branch completely different. And then ran through the guides, so the chat guide to do MVC and ATM guide, just doing some general testing and cleanup and make sure everything looks good there. And then that led me to a bug. which is sometimes the code blocks will not show up. So that, let's see, where the code blocks are sometimes empty, so sometimes it'll show up like this instead of what it should look like, which is like this. And so looking into that, I got to fix up for that. And then other than that, I've started on the CanJS client-side search, which is in progress, but it's looking pretty good right now. So some search results over here. And so we need to talk about this still. You know, I just put it here just because I didn't have a clear picture of where this was supposed to go, but I put it here for now, and so that's where it lives at the moment. And so next week I should be able to finish up that search, I think. So that's it.
Cool. Awesome, Mick. Oh, Biden?
Yeah, so we have the Bitballs app migrated to the new CanJS with defined maps, and all test cases are passing locally. Still, Travis is having issue when it's getting stuck on one particular test, so I'm investigating that. I'm updating your documentation. I also ported over can map backup to can define backup. There are a couple of test cases that need to add to it and make sure they're working. But all in all, that should be released to NPM soon too. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this week. And then I'll be continuing working on making sure the documentation is as up to date as possible for Bitballs.
Awesome. Yeah, let's talk sometime today, and I probably would like to, if it's all up to date, I kind of want to check it out and then push out a new version to Heroku.
Okay.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to talk about status-wise before we move on to topics? Does anybody have any other topics they want to bring up besides those that have already been mentioned? All right. Well, let's start with, should Steel package CSS with it? To me, we don't have plugins for, we don't make people like load CommonJS or things like that, which could possibly be written as extensions. Actually, they can't, but as super dependencies. I don't know. I just feel like for me, I just want to be able to load CSS out of I just want to be able to go and say,
I mean, I don't think it's going to make the guides any more difficult, because all you have to do is install it. Just like you install anything else, it would configure itself. I don't think it makes the guides any worse. And the only thing that I thought is, like, if anyone is not using NPM, then it becomes more difficult, especially if you're using less as well. So you'd have to configure both of them. I don't know. Actually, I kind of feel like I would like CommonJS to be a separate thing almost. Like, if that were possible, that would be nice. I don't know. I definitely think about more. I do lean towards not including it.
What's the benefit of not including it? Does it like vastly simplify what's there or anything?
Of not including it? No, it's mostly a workflow thing. It's more on the maintenance side of Steel. Now we could fix that by including CSS as part of the Steel project workflow aspect. I mean, yeah. Just more of the modular, like, why is CSS a special snowflake? That kind of thing. Why not package Steel unit and everything else as well?
Well,
Do that.
CSS is like one of the, I would say it's like, why is JavaScript almost like, it's just one of those things that come with the browser. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just inherent to the environment that you're working in. So having it support that, I actually don't mind. I see one benefit to not having it in, and is that it tells people, especially in the guide, but I think the guide would do it even if it was in, but I like the idea that, hey, you want to get stuff special features, hey, they exist.
Right.
Still CSS. Then it also forces us to really build out that ecosystem part of the documentation and make sure that's keeping up to date.
Yeah.
I think there's benefits.
I mean, that's part of what I'm doing is documenting those two as separate packages. I'm gonna do that. Well, still less I'm gonna do anyway. If CSS was part of core, I wouldn't document that as an ecosystem. I guess it would stay where it currently is.
Yeah, I
do see the point where CSS is kind of, it's part of, because I do like the idea, not to get too far ahead, but I do like the idea of Steel becoming more about like full asset management, like the full browser stuff, dependency management, and CSS would be.
Yeah, the problem is that CSS nobody writes anymore. So everybody is less or SAS or something else. So yeah, we could include it, but still, I think it's the reason for including IC is just making it that quick little demo is npm install Steel. Okay, now you're off to like making like a little nice demo, but I don't think it's. I don't really see a pro. Actually, I see pros and cons, and I don't think it matters that much. So keep it
maybe for one thing, like think about those component files where it's like all three things mixed into one, where it's like a template as whatever. If you were trying to like promote those, would they work without having to install an extra dependency, the CSS dependency? Like maybe that's worth bundling them together. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
good point. But if that depended on Steel CSS, in DoneJS you already get done CSS. You already get it, and you will always get it.
Matthew, all of the like, there's not going to be a problem with something like bit tabs with this, because bit tabs is now going to have to depend on CSS.
The same way to like the same way it depends on Steel Stash, right?
Yes, it does. Does it? Yes, it probably does. Okay, and that works. So as long as those kind of like, it's always weird because plugins are borderline super dependencies, and as long as that workflow works nice, is like, sure, I want this package. This package has, these plugins, it will work. Then I think we're fine.
Right.
Okay. Cool.
I don't know what we concluded there. It's kind of
get rid of CSS. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think we concluded we can keep it out. So the other thing I want to talk about was the can set, and I kind of want to find a way to prioritize this. There was the forum post about configuring a can set algebra. Basically, something like this would work. So you sort, and the minus here means
you're not sharing a screen.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this forum post configuring this can set algebra, and they have a sort that doesn't look like the normal what sort expects. It has a dash, and then this means reverse. Otherwise, it would just be name. There's this filter, and I think I missed my curlies up a little bit, but there's this objects, and then there's this nested like filtering kind of. You can make these objects that describe a form of filtering, and then there's this pagination. Now, I started along down the road of trying to actually make it work with an algebra. I think the sort, for the most part, is self-explanatory. Like, you have the sort prop, and it can pass it a function that takes the value of the sort, so like dash name or name, and then the left hand, like one side of one item and another item, and it basically has to return the whole like -1 or 1. So here I'm checking if it was dashed. Then I get the property value, which is like, you know, it might be dash name. I read the name property of each item, and then I return 1 or -1 based on which one of these values is higher. Sort's relatively straightforward, but then to do these other ones, filter and page, is rather difficult. The way I was about to do it, but then I was like, man, this is just really obnoxious. I was creating my own paginator, and then I was creating for the page property. It was going to like call into my paginator. Paginators basically translate whatever the paginated properties are that the original set is giving. So this set is giving a page object with a number and size. I need to translate that into a start and end and be able to reverse that back into number and limit. And I was going to use that paginator to recreate what page is, but then I was like, this is just horrible. No one's going to be able to know how to do this except for me. And then I was going to do something similar for filter, which is to basically build this into an object that like we normally filter with, and then to call the normal can set methods and what they return and kind of return that. It's like what I'm doing is I'm translating, really, to make it work, I'm translating this into the stuff that normally can set expects, and then kind of taking what can set returns and reversing that into what it would need to be to actually work. If that's confusing, that's my point. What I really want to do is prioritize a new set mechanic where, and I've kind of talked about this with Dave. David might remember this. I don't know if Matthew, you were there when I talked about this, but basically we would establish some kind of standard way of standard like way of passing arguments. Right, and limit, sorting, etc. Maybe eventually grouping or joining, that kind of stuff. These normal database type clauses, and this is what you would normally be passing to your get list, would be this. And what we can do is basically we can make the translation layer effectively work both ways. So what you would do for your algebra is, instead of, you could pass a function. And what this would do would be to take this and convert it to what your parameter should be to the server. So this would be like a set, and you're going to return the params. So maybe
params being what?
Params would be what you would normally send to the server. In his case, it would look like, you know, he would return. So if we made an identical thing, so this is, if I were to do the same thing like this, I would want val equal to age, paginate. So his page is page 4. So he's really going from item 40 to 49. So maybe, you know, 40, and he is sorting by, I don't know exactly what sort would look like, but maybe it's like the compound sorted thing. So maybe it's like name descending, and there's no join. So this is what he would have, and what we would expect people to do is return this and then be able to kind of reverse. I think it would actually take 2 arguments. It'd be kind of both ways, where it took params and returned the set. I think you would need both. But people would basically just do these type of transformations And I think that's a little bit easier to understand.
So you're just trading like kind of an explicit API where we have all these, what were they, like the sort and all that, those type, what do you call those things?
Yeah. Now I think there should still be helpers. I definitely think there should be helpers like, it's very common that you want to like go from like range inclusive to, limit offset. Then you should be able to like do your, if he was range inclusive or he's like page number, so maybe it's like, page number to limit offset. I think we can still have a bunch of these helpers. So he would be doing something like, var params, and he would have his, he wants to have a page property, and he would do something like this, right? He would pass the sets, dot paginate, and out would pop something like this. And we would just give people a bunch of helpers to do these kind of transformations. They could create helpers further out, like, maybe Ruby on Rails has one way. I know Mongo has another way. And you could create these kind of, maybe even these composite functions that are able to do the translation. And there could be like little ones in there as well. And I think this is the way I think would be much easier for people to understand how to configure a set algebra. So that,
yeah, I think you're trading like definitely flexibility. This is way more flexible. I could see this function getting really big though, because an algebra is for an entire model. So a model has multiple use cases. So not every time you use this are you going to be doing pagination. Not every.
Yeah. You would have to check
using it. So.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to have to check if the paginate property is there.
Yes.
And,
right.
and all of that.
If it's part of the set.
I feel like would be a lot easier to test these methods because it's just like incomes set, outcomes. Like you could just check and I think this is one of those things that humans can do easily. Yeah, it's going to be annoying to write all the use cases, but I feel like it's really easy to write a test then, like, does this get converted to this? Does this get converted to this? If you have that, then everything works. The other thing I like about it is what we could do is it would start making the parameters that are kind of expected to get list kind of start consolidating, right? So it's like if you're writing a widget that was doing pagination, well, you could write it always like this, right? And then what you would expect is people's model layer to include the correct algebra to do that translation, right? So that way your CanJS widgets would kind of become abstract to the model layer. Like they could be past a model layer and they would just say paginate like this. And that way you could write a grid and then you would have the expectation that if I passed you a model layer for this grid, that you would write this, someone would fill this out, and then everything would just work. So anyways, I think this is a good idea. I don't know where to prioritize this. Part of me wants to prioritize this like immediate. A big part of me wants to do this immediately. It'll probably take like a week or so if I were to do it, but I think so many people struggle with with this kind of stuff. I feel like it would be a big improvement. I don't know when it's worth it, but I don't know. I feel like it's maybe before DoneJS is released, so that we show this kind of stuff for people building algebras. I don't know when.
Yeah, I think algebras are kind of tough to explain. I think it does make it, I don't know, for me, it's always easier when I can like touch and feel something. You know what I mean? And I think this allows you to do that. Okay, well, I'm just modifying a set. I like it from that aspect. So I think it would make it easier to explain what's going on here, even if it might result in like more code.
Yeah.
Is there a use case that would like use this conversion that doesn't involve like passing parameters onto the server, like something else that would have this set to params conversion, params to set conversion? Just wondering if like set, if algebra is if the set algebra is the right place to do that, or is this more specific to like converting parameters to a server request? I wonder.
I'm not really sure what you.
Not really following what I'm saying. Would this be used in any way other than just for converting to server?
Well, what do you mean by this? Like, do you mean like set logic in general?
Set algebra. No, like set algebra with the two functions where it converts back and forth. Like your line 15 to 24.
With this, but I guess I should say like the converting back and forth between two different things like that, that happens in some ways like can route in some ways as an example of like, well, you're given these parameters, you pump out a URL, given this URL, you pump out these parameters. And like converters are like this in the new can stash converters are in some ways conceptually the same thing. I think having, transposable, logic is that's just like a math thing. There's just like a force of nature that those kind of things you'll see in a lot of coding places. If your question is like, is there something more rudimentary to this where it should be like can translate and then can set would use can translate? I don't know. Mostly because the functions, these functions themselves are like not the real workhorse of set algebra. Set algebra is actually internally becoming much more like a little database engine, but can do things that no database engine can do, such as work on incomplete data. Like you can have two sets and then union them. Maybe there are some databases that can do stuff like that, but typically databases work from making the assumption that they have everything. So set algebra itself is like, I guess I don't know what you're exactly getting. But if your thing is like you should be just doing something like a new, like if we should be doing new set, like new can translate, and then.
Well, I think what he's I don't want to speak for Adam, but what I interpreted is that he's saying like, is this always being used to translate for databases? And I think the answer is probably yes, but I could see where maybe you want to translate this and pull something from IndexedDB, which is also a database, but it's a different type of database.
Yes. That's interesting. That's interesting thought. I don't know if it's an interesting thought. I have to think about that. Like I guess
maybe you would have different algebras depending on what the target is.
Yeah, I think the thing is well, I think actually the question really is, and I've been thinking about it, and I see where I think what I've been thinking about, something I've been thinking about, and where you might be thinking are converging, which is basically like, where does this translation take place, right? And the idea was like the naive place is in get list data. Like everything else is going to work on this like kind of nice sets, and then in get list data inside data URL, that was going to be implemented mostly as just like, okay, like algebra, like you'd have your connection.algebra, and you would say this is given the params, like you would say like get set or something, or like, you know, maybe not get set, but like to set. And then this would outcome the or not, it would actually be the other way, set to params, and then out would come like this thing, and you would use and then we do our normal like new XHR kind of thing, and like, you know, set that as the, you know, whatever we set that data, right? Given these params, I guess we set it as URL encoded. Anyways, we make an AJAX request. Right, we do this kind of stuff. Now, what the question to me is really going to be like, are there, and if that's what Adam is getting at and what you were saying, are there generic transports? Like I could make a, like, I don't know, fancy, like I could make a, this is the data URL behavior. I'm not writing this out right, but whatever, pseudocode stuff. This is the data URL behavior. And this algebra to params allows us some fuzziness. So it's like, well, we have this kind of way to inject a translation between, you know, what are this kind of standard params that we want people to use and this like, you know, whatever their server really wants. Like, could there be other things that are like transportable in the same way? I don't know, like some like arbitrary like SQL transport, and it's always going to just do like normal database connection stuff. I don't even remember this stuff anymore because it's been so long, like the low level connection stuff, and then you would basically ask it for, hey, for MongoDB or for Postgres or for MySQL, run the set through the params. Out is going to come that specific SQL that you should be passing to this generic connection mechanism. Sure, that stuff may be possible, but that's not like a design goal right now, I guess I should say. But sure, it could happen if that's what we were actually talking about.
It's all really interesting stuff, and I was glad to have asked the question to get all this kind of stuff. But more along the lines I think I was trying to ask was, like in your get list data example there, where's the part that, like, you know, algebra becomes important? Because the whole point of the algebra is so that, like, you know, you get the caching, you know, it's not going to make the request if we already have that.
Data URL, there's no, the algebra really isn't important to data URL. It's the other behaviors, like real time, where the algebra's ability to do logic becomes important. In, like, if you just do like real time, like there's something like this where there's like updated instance or updated data or something like that, and this is when a server response has been updated correctly. I think it's updated instance. This is when an instance has been updated and you get the instance back. What this will do is it's got an internal store of every list that is like currently kind of in memory, and we'll go through each, like it's like the list store. Go through each one. And I'll use arrow syntax because that's, I need this to be right. And what it's going to do is go for each list, it's going to ask the algebra, does the lists have a set on them? So does the algebra, like we could just say, does this algebra is this, I think it's has, there's a method has, which is kind of like subset. Does this list set, the lists set contain the list?
And so then I guess my point there was
the instance. And if it does, then we're gonna put the instance in the list. We do something like list. Actually, what we do is we do this.algebra.index. We ask for the index of the instance in the list, and that gives us, like, maybe it's in position 5 based on like whatever the sort order is, and then we shove that, we insert that into the list. So that's kind of how.
So I guess my poorly defined question then was, so if this toParam is only going to be used in like the data URL part, maybe it belongs only in like connection behavior data URL rather than on algebra. Does that make sense?
Except that CanFixture will use this same thing. CanFixture will need to know how to reverse it. That's actually in some ways what we could split it, but like the reverse will be needed for CanFixture for sure, because it's gonna like get these crazy things, and it's gonna need to know how to like actually do the set logic based on that.
Okay, I see that.
So that's why like an algebra to me is a reflection, just conceptually how I think of an algebra. And I've thought about, like, should we just call it like can service? But that's too close to can connect. It's like this one, it's really your select statement that you would normally have in a database. And it's a description for how your parameters of a service layer translate into really selects in a database, retrieval of items in a database. And that's all it really is for. And you describe, my idea, conceptually what it is you describe, you're really describing what those parameters mean by how they translate into, our standard set, our like an internal understanding that CanSet actually has of like how to perform logic. And then with that, you have this algebra that allows you to like do set logic based around, an understanding of how your service layer works. And then anything else can use that algebra to do fancy behaviors. I don't know. It's very meta, but it's nice because when you can test it, like, I mean, in this JS bin, the way I was getting this to work, if I lost my JS bin, where did it go? I guess here. Good guess. Okay. I was actually just calling on my algebra to make sure I was getting the right result out. Oh, let's do a union on this set and this set. And what's the union of this? And it's an easy way to kind of check that, like, without having to actually go through CanConnect or whatever, that the logic is going to work. I can make sure that, the real time is going to work without actually doing the real time by just checking, like, hey, should this set of raw data properties that we would get potentially back from the server, does this belong in this set? If it does, then I know real time is probably going to work. Anywho, yeah, the interesting thing about this pagination, the way that he had this, is that this doesn't actually work. Like, if you have, one thing I realized is don't use, I think I've learned this once in the past and I was just reminded of it. Try to avoid ever using page numbers as your surface layer. It's much better to use limit offset or start index and index. The reason is because let's say I had two, I kind of explained it down here. Let's say I loaded page number 1 and each page is size 10, and page number 2 each page is size and page is size 10. How do you express the union of those two sets? You would have to do something like page number 0.5 size 20. If you get what I'm saying, because I want to load 20 items starting at 10. There's no way to really say that other than like saying, well, I'm starting halfway through my page sizes at size 20. That's really weird. Anyways, pro tip, don't use page numbers in APIs. Limit offset or start index and index. Otherwise you could potentially get screwy things like this if the service layer ever needed to change. Anyhow. All right, anything else anybody want to talk about? Any final thoughts just about like prioritization of this?
Of that, I think it'd be good to get in for 1.0. DoneJS
1.0. So like highest priority of like CanJS 3.1 probably.
Part of that.
This would be a new feature, so it'd be to bump up CanJS 3.1.
I don't know. Maybe. I'm not as concerned about CanJS minor versions because I guess I still haven't really.
I don't think we should be concerned about minor versions. They should just happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like there are other stuff that we've talked about that I can't remember right now.
I have started creating the epic for CanJS 3.1, and we can probably talk about that next time.
Okay. Something's in the back of my mind. Can't remember.
I've also wanted to do
better warnings.
Can Connect up with kind of just the middle ground. What's it called? Approach, the mix in or the interfaces kind of approach. But I feel like that can be that's less important, I think, because Can Connect, sure, it might be a little weird to set up, but like really you can do anything you want with it pretty simply. Algebra, it's very tricky if you have a weird service layer to figure out how to like make that work. Like it's tricky for me, and I wrote it, so that's like means it's impossible for other people, and I feel like that is a really bad thing.
Yeah. Prioritize.
Can Connect isn't impossible. Like it's doable. So okay. Cool. Talk to y'all later. Good meeting. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.